I don't know if they'll kill me in 2026. I don't know what they're cooking up for me, what they have in store for me. But in 2026, that is the year where they're going to try to strike at the head, the sheep scatter, and they're going to try to corral them back into slavery incorporated with some kind of Groyper veneer. That's going to be the playbook. You can take that to the bank. They're already playing it. They've already been playing it. And that was the 1-2 punch of Tucker and Piers Morgan. Bring me onto the show, making of a murderer. Let's get a glimpse into the twisted mind of Nick Fuentes and show everybody how evil he is and how anyone could follow him. Then bring him on Piers Morgan to reveal the real Nick Fuentes that loves Hitler and this, that, and the other. That's the MO. In the end, where all of this is headed is J.D. Vance for president in 2028. That is the lead which they have buried. As quickly as they got J.D. Vance in the vice presidency nomination last year, they want to get him in the Oval Office in 2028. They want to make him the president. Why? Who knows? But there are powerful, powerful forces in Silicon Valley, billionaires, the GOP, all the king's men that want to make J.D. Vance the president. And I have identified myself very early on as an opponent of J.D. Vance. And for that, they want to bury me. For that, they want to kill me. Because I'm telling a lot of young men that Vance is going to need in the election, I'm telling a lot of young men, do not trust this guy. Because this guy is a creep. We don't know who he is. We don't know what his real name is. We don't know what his real job is. We don't know who he owes, who blackmailed him, who he works for. We just don't know anything about this guy. And it's weird. It's weird. He's weird. His family's weird. It's weird that they're all promoting him. Something is not right here. And that much is obvious. Everybody with eyes can see that something is off about that. And that's the biggest thing. And I believe it when I say this, that if I were going out on the show every night and saying, let's all be good team players and let's all vote for J.D. Vance in 28, they would tolerate me. Trust me when I tell you that if I were going out every day on the show and saying, let's all be good little Republicans and let's dutifully vote for J.D. Vance, you know they would tolerate me. They would tolerate my antics. They would tolerate my extremism. They would tolerate all of it. They would bring me in under their wing as a junior partner. They would pat me on the head. They would give me opportunities if I was willing to play ball, if I was willing to horse trade, if I was willing to say, vote for JD. Everybody, we got to be all in. But they are clearing the runway. They have created a media ecosystem using comedians, using podcasts, using conventions, using things like Turning Point. They have created a runway, and they have cleared the runway for Vance to be unopposed in 28, to raise $1 billion, and then to be the next president, to inherit all the machinery that Trump created, all this stuff that Trump has done with the executive branch, all the rules Trump has broken. They want J.D. Vance to inherit that.
Yeah, I agree with Nick. I think in 2026, he became way too big to ignore. So now it's obvious the president knows him, vice president knows him, everybody knows who he is, the biggest podcasters. And I think because his influence is so big and he opposes J.D. Vance, they're going to try to do anything they can to silence him. That's my opinion. I think Nick is right. He was Lord Voldemort for the longest time. They try to sweep him under the rug. They try to ignore him and act like he didn't matter or was irrelevant. And it came to the point where, bro, you can't avoid this guy. He has growing influence. I think what contributed the biggest was the fact that he was unbanned on X. So ever since he was unbanned on X, his clips came everywhere, and a lot of the stuff he was saying was very interesting. People found it interesting, okay? Because Trump made a lot of promises. He said he was going to deport this many people, no new wars, and he's bending the knee to Israel a whole lot too. All things that Nick said would happen, you know. He famously went against Trump in his campaign, the Groyper War. Yeah, that along with going on major podcasts that wouldn't give him the time of day before, but like I said, too big to ignore. You can't sweep him under the rug anymore. He has growing influence. He's funny. He says interesting things, and people can't help but to not look away. And it's so funny, all these podcasts and all these shows, they always mention Nick. Always Nick Fuentes this. What do you think about Nick Fuentes? All these podcasts will always mention him or his ideas, but they would never have him on. Became the year that all these podcasts finally addressed him. He came out of the darkness, and then they had him on the show. And a lot of people, all these podcast episodes became the highest episodes on all these guys' channels. So that was interesting as well. It just shows that this guy has growing popularity, and his ideas and a lot of stuff he was saying is just very interesting. A lot of it's true, and a lot of people do agree with a lot of stuff. I'm not saying everything he says is right, but you cannot ignore Nick Fuentes.
The next step is they're going to try to gaslight us into thinking that this has everything to do with things other than what I'm describing. This is about economics. This is about the political left. This is about everything other than what it's really about. For example, I saw Tucker Carlson interview Matt Walsh, and they're talking about the great replacement, that non-white people are replacing white people everywhere where we used to reside. And Tucker said, I'm not even saying it's a bad thing, but they're telling us that this is happening and they're denying that it's real. He says, I'm not even saying it's a bad thing. He repeatedly and consistently says, identity politics is evil. And the great replacement has nothing to do with racial demographics. It has to do with voting rights. Well, here's a statistic for you. Since 2012, 50% of this country's newborns have been white and 50% have been non-white. So in the census, it will tell you that the country is 57% white, 43% non-white. But if you look at the newborns, if you look at where the arrow is pointing, for the last 13 years, the newborns have been 50-50. For the younger generations, it is 50-50. For Gen Z, for Gen Alpha, this is our country. And when we are the old people, when the boomers and then the Gen Xers die off, and it's millennials, Zoomers, Gen Alpha, Gen Beta, it's going to be even less white than that. The older generations will be 50-50. The younger generations will be even less. And every successive generation, less white after that. And that is what every city, every town, whether it's a small town or a medium-sized city or the biggest cities, that's what every single polity in the country will look like.
Now, I don't think anything Nick says here is bad, okay? I think there's a lot of truth to what he's saying. I just think at bottom line, immigration is just out of control. We know this. You'd be lying to say that we do have it under control. I just think people need to come over here the right way, legally, and to a degree, I do agree with Nick says, white people are losing their identity in this country, and they are becoming the minority in this country. I don't think he's crazy for saying that, for believing what he wants to believe. I just find it kind of interesting. There is truth to what he's saying.
Well, Trump bombed Iran, and in terms of immigration, we filled the H-1B cap, we doubled the number of Chinese students, and we don't have mass deportations. So maybe it would have been a good thing if we forced Trump's feet to the fire on those issues. Maybe it would have been a good thing if we demanded a commitment back then when he needed our vote, not now when he needs nothing from us. For that, I was called a shill, plant, a fed. They said I made a deal with the FBI. To avoid prosecution, I said that I would not get Trump elected. Now you see that I was right. And the reason I bring this up is because just as quickly as Trump has crashed and burned, they want us to forget about it and already get ready for the next one.
Yeah, I agree with Nick right here. He goes on and just criticizes Trump's administration and what kind of job he's been doing. There's a lot of truth to what Nick's saying when predicting the Trump administration. And we're only a little bit over a year, about a year, and we're already talking about JD Vance being president. So there's a lot of shady stuff. Yeah. So Nick also announced he was going to take a long generational break, that he's not going to come back to streaming until January 12th. So it's going to be very interesting. I think a lot to look forward to. I'm patriotic. I love this country. So I love to see somebody passionate about this country as well, and curious to see what's going to happen next year, especially in politics. Nick has become way too big to ignore. And I found this interesting clip of Joe Rogan even talking about the idea of Nick, the concept of Nick Fuentes even becoming president, which I think that's kind of wild. So if all these podcasts keep talking about Nick and never having him on, is this going to be the same case for Joe Rogan? It will be interesting to see Nick on Joe Rogan. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.